All right, hey guys, we're back here at Black Forest Racing today. Beautiful spring in North Carolina to do some more stuff on our GTI Big Turbo project car. So today we've got some things planned, like doing charge pipes, got the blow-off valve that we're also going to install, as well as wrapping some things up. We got like a rear valence to put on and some things like that. Got that temporary coolant pipe you saw in the last episode that we're going to redo also. And then probably be another episode where it's a lot of little things that we're going to do and get that taken care of. But hopefully we should have some good progress today. So in the last episode, at the end, I wrapped up mentioning that we did the vacuum pump delete. That is this little plug that we got going on here. Normally there would be a big vacuum pump that bolts on and then has some lines that run down back there to give you power brakes. Had a friend of mine, shout out to Tommy's Chop Shop. They're in North Carolina if you need any fabrication, anything like that done. Also, link to them in the description below. But they had that made for us, so we're gonna at some point have to make vacuum lines going to the brake booster so that that can still work. Probably won't get to that today, but it's something else to add to the list that I need to do. But yeah, so we didn't show that to you before, but here's a little bit better of a look at it. As you see, it's just a little aluminum plug, seals with an O-ring, press fit in there. Nothing too crazy or complicated. Just cleans up the engine bay a little bit. Now what we're going to do is go ahead and pull off this core support for the millionth time so that we can get our boost piping in and deal with that temporary rubber coolant hose that we made last time. Actually got the fittings for that now to make it an AN hose like everything else. So here's this temporary rubber hose that we did last time to check the cooling system, make sure it didn't have any leaks. We got the actual fittings we need to make this a real hose now. So, okay, so now that we've taken off this janky rubber hose that we had on here before as a temporary measure, we can thread our new fittings. Gonna actually be just a really stubby little hose, which means we can take our hose, kind of set it to where it will be, and then mark it, wrap it with tape so we can get it cut. So we take the tape roughly in the middle of where we want it. This is to prevent it from fraying when we cut it. Anything that's really sticky when you take it off is just going to pull all the frays right back out and kind of defeat the whole purpose of it.
Not only that, but you want a tape that's rigid rather than flexible like a duct tape, otherwise it will still fray.
But there is some actual stainless steel in here, which gets really sharp and is super. Anyone who's made a bunch of AN fittings will tell you that they always cut yourself on those, so be aware of that. In here like this. So it's important, you want to lubricate this as it goes into the hose. Otherwise it's going to be really difficult because it's grabbing on rubber and it's, you know, going to fight you the whole time. And you want to try and generally keep an eye on the hose, make sure it's not pushing out. Okay. Lost the audio for the past couple tries I've tried to tell you about this, but we've got this hose made now. I didn't get to show you making this end because the audio is just gone, but it's on now and you can see that the gap is here. You want to get just about a fingernail's gap in there to make sure you get it tight enough. And then one important step I did not mention, I don't think last time I showed you making these fittings, is you want to clean out the inside of this. When you cut it with that cutoff wheel, it puts a lot of dust and debris in here that you definitely want to clean out with some compressed air and maybe even some solvent to run it through there and make sure it doesn't get clogged in there. It's especially important in oil lines, fuel lines. A little bit less so in this one because it's coolant, but we're still going to go ahead and clean that out and get this installed on the car. We can go ahead and get this threaded on here, like so. This one onto this pipe. Okay, get these tightened up. All right, now that's tight. We shouldn't have to pull that off again. We're gonna put the core support back on now so that we can mock up the charge pipes underneath.
What do you think? This is about the 230th time?
Probably.
All right, so we're under the car now. We're going to work on the placement of the oxygen sensor. Because this is a high performance application, the turbo is going to be running really hot. The factory version of this puts the oxygen sensor right up at the top of the downpipe just after the turbo. That's for cold start and for emissions to get it to heat up really fast. We are going to be getting this car, we plan on getting it really hot. So we're going to move the oxygen sensor actually downstream a little bit to get it a little bit further away from the turbo to prevent it from overheating. All these sensors have built-in heater circuits in it, so it will heat itself up, and we'll just prevent it from overheating by being too close to the turbo. So we're going to move it down right about here actually and put it in just after the flex joint. We have the nice bung here ready with the saddle joint on it, so we're going to fit that, mark its location, and then we're going to take the downpipe off so we can weld it.
Can't see it right now, but I'm loosening a nut that's directly above you.
Got the downpipe over here on the workbench. Going to drill the hole for the oxygen sensor bung. This one has a little step in the back side of it so that it locates very nicely. So we'll have to drill all the way out to that size. Get this one in there and located. We've already drilled a pilot hole and center punched it. Now we're just going to drill it out. Stainless steel is really tough on drill bits, so a little bit of lubricant helps the drill bit survive a little bit longer. Alright, we've got the oxygen sensor bung fitted into the pipe. Ended up having to file it a little bit because I couldn't find a drill that was big enough. So I got filed the fit, nice snug fit, hammered it into place, it's not going anywhere. And now we'll go ahead and weld it in place with our handy dandy TIG welder.
So we're gonna open up our wastegate here and replace the, well, not replace the spring. There's not currently a spring in here, so we're going to add the spring. This is what Wastegates Work controls the boost. We have a video talking about that, so you can take a look, but we're going to be putting in a 5.8 psi spring, which essentially means that that is the least amount of boost that this will be able to have at any given time when the wastegate's controlling it. Okay, so now that we've got the lid off, we're gonna put our spring in here. It's got a little groove for it to sit down into. Then go ahead and compress that down and work on getting one of these bolts started. Definitely useful to have a second set of hands for this because that spring is kind of annoying to deal with. Now that we've got them started, we want to make sure that we get that orange diaphragm in there so that it's not pinched at all, because that's what actually seals it. Go ahead and get the rest of these started, and then we can run them in the rest of the way. These things don't need to be super crazy, ridiculous tight. They're relatively small bolts, so you definitely want to make sure you don't over tighten these and strip them out.
And they're threaded into aluminum.
Another good idea, since this is spring loaded at this point, is go a little bit at a time so you pull this thing down evenly, and you're not gonna get it binding up or anything and causing the bolts to either get cross-threaded or just, you know, unnecessary torque in different directions.
Alright, we're ready to weld this last piece of the downpipe. We had tacked this in one of the earlier videos, and now that we had to take the other part of it off to do the oxygen sensor, we went ahead and took this part off. We'll get this last joint in the exhaust system welded, and then the exhaust system will be done. You may be able to hear it, you may not. I have the back purge set up on this piece. You might have noticed I didn't back purge when I welded the sensor bung in. That's because it's not really a critical part and it wasn't worth getting all the stuff out, and kind of because I forgot. But it's okay because that's not structural or anything like that. This piece is, so I definitely went ahead and got all the stuff out to back purge it, and it's going now. And so first we're going to lay down a couple of tacks, and then we'll go ahead and get it welded. There we are.
all set all the way around. We'll leave the back purge on for a little bit, just until the pipe gets completely cooled off. And we'll be all set, ready to go put this back on the car.
Now this would look a little bit different than what you probably have on your car, because this is a European bumper. It's got the longer license plate cut out. But this is pretty straightforward. Just essentially snaps in once you get lined up. The middle bit's a little difficult. If you actually have the bumper foam that you're supposed to have, the crash foam that's actually super useful in the event of a crash, this is way easier because the bumper won't flex, but the previous owner of this bumper did not give that to me when I bought it, so it does not have it. It's not all the way snapped in the middle, but it's good enough for now. Let's go ahead and put our license plate bracket back on. Half of the downpipe up here, it's loose so that we can get the other half of it back on here for the final install.
That's the one for the back.
I'm not going to do it fully tight until we get the rest of the exhaust on. Now we're going to put on our air filter that we got here. This car is tuned for running without a mass airflow sensor, so we're just going to put a air filter on the turbo. We may make an intake for it later, but for the time being we're just going to do the air filter directly on the turbo. So we've got our wastegate. There are a bunch of different ports on here for plumbing them. Obviously you don't need to run all of them, so they give you some plugs to install in them. So we're going to go ahead and put these plugs in here and block off the ports that we are not going to be using. There are also ports on here for water, if you were wanting to water cool your wastegate. It's usually only something that you do in race car or something that is really under boost most of the time. So not something we're going to be dealing with on this wastegate. So we also have the actual banjo bolt for operating the wastegate that we've got to put in here. Some crush washers that they supply with it. You want to make sure you put those in the right orientation on both sides of the fitting. And we're not going to tighten this all the way so that we can get this pointed exactly how we want to have it in the car. But so for right now we'll just snug that down so that it's mobile. But this will go to the boost controller so that it can operate this. Now we're going to install the wastegate. Because it's location where it's really tight in here, you're not going to be able to see where it goes exactly when we install it. But here it is down here on the back of the header right next to the turbo. So we're going to go ahead and get that bolted on and everything installed right now. Another thing that we have to do, so we're going to get knocked out here now, is put these bolts in the crank damper. As you can see, this is actually not the factory damper. This is a Fluidampr, which has some extra damping available. That it's really good to have these when you do a single mass flywheel, and this car also has balance shafts deleted, so there's a lot of extra harmonics and vibrations that are just going to be a byproduct of both of those things, in addition to motor mounts, all that stuff. So this helps eliminate some of those harmonics. We're also installing this with ARP bolts instead of the factory Allens. As you can see there, they're kind of rusty and gross looking. So I'm going to put these in. We did Loctite these. The vibrations that we were just talking about do not become an issue. And we're going to go ahead and torque these ones before we remove those remaining factory ones. It's generally a good idea also to put the parking brake on. You want to have it in gear so that it will hold this, but put the parking brake on so as you're tightening these, the car doesn't drive away on you. Other bolts are torqued. We can go ahead and remove these factory bolts and replace them. All right, so that is now all tight with our ARP bolts.
So now that we have the wastegate installed, Max has done the crank pulley, we're going to go ahead and get rid of these big long wires that are here. These are for the N75 and the DV that we're not going to be using on this because we'll have a vacuum operated DV and a boost controller other than the N75 that is as of yet undecided. To make this not have fault codes, what we need to do is we need to go to my handy dandy resistor box here and wire in some resistors. In order to know which are the right ones, we're going to have to measure the resistance of our existing solenoid valve here, which this one's the DV. And we'll go down inside of it with my meter is set to measure ohms, and we get 12.8 ohms. And I'd already previously measured the N75 and it came out just a little over 20. It was at about 22, 23 ohms. I suspect that both of those will be good at that value. Although I do have a 15 ohm resistor here that we can use for the DV, a 22 that we can use for the N75. So we'll go ahead and cut these wires to get them out of the harness. They both share a main power wire, which is this white and red one. So we can go ahead and just cut them one at a time just to make sure that we don't short anything, just in case there's some residual capacitor or something. And then we pull those out. We're done with those. Never to be seen again. Then we'll go in here. We have our wires we just cut. We're going to strip them back a little bit. We'll get the soldering iron, pre-tin those, and grab some heat shrink as well and get that all set up. One of the most common mistakes is to simply forget to put the heat shrink over the wire before you get started. That can be a fatal mistake in the figurative sense, because then you have to take the joint back apart to put the heat shrink on. Or what you do most of the time is end up with electrical tape. You can take these wires and just tuck them up into the harness here and cover them in the wire loom, which might be a little bit easier said than done. Ta-da!
All right, and then we have this Euro S3 cover. The normal ones typically have a little outlet on this side for the diverter valve and N75 wires to come through. Since we don't have those anymore, this one's got that covered up. It's just a nice little touch. All right, that's all installed now. Fancy red coil harness. All right, so that's it for this episode. I actually added some things to the list. We got an O2 bung that we did add in. We figured out a lot of stuff. We crossed off the wiring for the N75, the diverter valve, things like that. We did the O2 bung, yes. And we got the throttle body pipe actually from one of my friends here. As you can see, it's already done and made. Got the blow-off valve figured out, so we actually got to plumb this. We'll do that maybe in the next episode. But we got to install this thing. Get our boost controller figured out. We got an issue with the clutch we got to figure out too. But we're getting there. We've got all the parts on the way that we need. So next episode, hopefully, will be a bit more exciting. Yeah, lots of little things, but we'll see you in the next one.